Happening right now, Ukraine's president meeting with congressional lawmakers in D.C. to discuss increasing aid for Ukraine. I mean, that's going to happen any minute now. President Zelenskyy is in Washington to rally more support for the U.S. to continue sending money and weapons to bolster the Ukrainian war effort. This is a live look inside the Capitol where you see there are some reporters standing by to wait for Zelenskyy's arrival. He should be there any second now. But unlike his last trip to Washington, it is a different atmosphere, a lot more Republican skepticism about U.S. support for Ukraine. Following his meeting with members of Congress, President Zelenskyy will head to the Pentagon and then the White House for a sit-down with President Biden. Ambassador Kurt Volker is very well versed in the history of our relationship with Ukraine. He served as the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations 2017 to 2019 and was also the U.S. Ambassador to NATO from 2008 to 2009. Ambassador, first, I've got to ask you, this is Zelenskyy's first visit to the Pentagon, giving him an audience, as Congress did when he spoke on the Hill less than a year ago. How can Zelenskyy convince especially these GOP lawmakers to continue writing a blank check?
Well, first off, he needs to make clear it's not a blank check. He needs to make clear that accountability is something he takes seriously, corruption is something that he takes seriously, and he's making sure that whatever funds are provided by the U.S. are being used to good effect. I think it's also important to make clear that the money for Ukraine's defense against Russia's aggression is not going to Ukraine directly. It's going to the Pentagon, which pays U.S. defense industry to produce weapons, and we give the Ukrainians our old stuff and get the new stuff ourselves. These are important things for people to understand, and I think Zelenskyy needs to make clear that he is a good custodian and very grateful for the assistance being given.
You make very good points, especially as there are so many who've accused Ukraine as much controversy and conspiracy and thievery inside their own government, the corruption, as Russia has. But there are plenty of GOP lawmakers joining Democrats in urging President Biden to send Ukraine long-range missiles and continue sending this high artillery weaponry. What are the chances, even with those tools, they'll defeat or at least dissuade Russia from further invasion?
Well, I think that, first off, I would flip it around and say, what are the chances of Russia actually exterminating Ukraine as a country, eliminating Ukraine as a national identity? Zero. There is no way that Russia wins this. What does happen is Ukraine survives as a sovereign, independent European democracy. Now, the question is, how does the war end? How do we stop Russia's aggression and push them back? Can they push Russia all the way back? Maybe. But what we have an interest in is ending this as quickly as possible. And that's the justification for providing them the weapons that they need so that they can do this as quickly as they can. So we're not dealing with this same war again next year.
As somebody well-versed in the politics of Washington and the messaging that needs to come out to the American people to support this war, how do you tell people this is not just another killing field when you have a behemoth like Russia, who may be outgunned in terms of not having the technology that Ukraine has, thanks to us, but is certainly outmanning Ukraine and has a leader who just doesn't quit?
Right. Well, you're absolutely right about Russia. They have a leader who is committed to continuing this war no matter what, because he has staked his reputation on it. But what's happening is that Russia is dramatically weakening itself. And remember, Russia is an adversary not just for Ukraine, but for the United States and NATO and many others. And they are dramatically weakening themselves, militarily, economically, politically. And I don't believe that the Russian elites will allow this to go on indefinitely. So rather than seeing that Russia has an indefinite supply of manpower to kill, instead, I think that you're going to see people inside Russia saying, we have to shut this down. And it's important that we show resolve to get them to that conclusion.
One more question for you right before we run out of time, Ambassador. Zelenskyy actually challenged President Trump to reveal a peace plan because famously he has been saying that he could have had this war over in a day because of his relationship with Putin and his previous talks with him. Do you believe this is smart, this is wise for Zelenskyy to be so emboldened and to actually challenge President Trump?
Right. I would say be careful what you ask for, because I think President Trump has been careful not to say exactly what he would do. He's well aware that if he is reelected as president, it's going to be 18 months from now or 16 months from now when he assumes office, The situation will be very different then than it is today. He shouldn't pin himself down on exactly what he should do. I think he's been wise not to pin himself down, and I think it's better not to push that button.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.